Hello, and welcome to ELCA Advocacy Starter Kit sessions. Today we'll be exploring the question, how do I use media for impact? I'm Joey Chin, ELCA Advocacy's Communications Hunger Advocacy Fellow. During this session, which originally aired in 2021, you will hear insights from leaders engaged in faith-based advocacy. From Minnesota, Tammy Wolhoff will be joining us to share experiences and pointers for getting an advocacy message out through media outlets. Heather Taylor is joining from Bread for the World to put the focus on the potential use of social media. The Reverend Sarah Lilia, an advocate in New Jersey, will be joined by that synod's bishop, the Reverend Tracy Bartholomew, to share about considerations around using op-eds and letters to the editor as tools. And in our current climate, we'll be hearing from Deacon Nick Bates about misinformation and what we can do about it. We are also fortunate to hear from the Reverend Leslie Copeland-Toon of the National Council of Churches to hear about her experience joining media attention and public events. The Christian community of the ELCA envisions a world experiencing the difference that God's grace and love in Christ can make for all people and creation. So let's open today with a special welcome from Jennifer De Leon, ELCA Director for Racial Justice. Thank you for joining us.
Hola, I'm Jennifer De Leon, Director Racial Justice for the ELCA. Successful advocacy happens when we generate support and get others to join us in taking action. We do this by breaking down policy issues beyond facts and figures. We humanize the issues to tell a story. In addition to communicating with your elected officials, how else do you get the word out? How do you generate support for the issues from others? In today's session, you will hear from advocates how they have used media to get the story out.
Hello, my name is Tammy Wolhoff, and I'm the Director of Lutheran Advocacy Minnesota. We have lots of opportunities to share our advocacy through the media and to amplify that advocacy through the media. You know, as you think about it, we have opportunities with newspapers, magazines, radio. There's TV news and cable news programs, newsletters and blogs, and even podcasts and online content. Lots of fantastic opportunities. First of all, it's helpful to have a connection to or a relationship with someone, like a reporter or an editor or a columnist, a program host or a producer. There are some communities that I work with where the local newspaper editor is a member of the local Lutheran church. In smaller communities, it's often easier to have that relationship built in. Those of us who live in metropolitan areas have it a little more difficult, but I know a fellow who worked with an editor at a big metro newspaper. In fact, it was the Minnesota Star-Tribune. And he actually was able to build a relationship over several years. That took a process. At first, he sort of let them know that some of the things that they were printing were really good articles, or that he appreciated that they were covering those sorts of things. The first time that he presented something to them, they didn't cover it. Second time he presented something to them, they didn't cover it. That's the way it goes sometimes with those metro things. But he was persistent, and eventually they started turning to him for more information or asking him if he knew of a church that had something coming up when they needed some filler. And when he had events, they started trusting him to bring good things to them. If you're doing an activity, it's helpful to create an activity notification. And that can be a general notification for all the different places you want to send it. But when you send it to each place, it should have a personalized pitch. So for instance, one time I did with a Star Tribune columnist, I said to her, hey, you know, this is something that we're doing that is going to impact this legislative process, and this is happening right now at the state legislature. Wouldn't it be cool if you could cover this in your column? And you know, I talked a little bit about some of the columns of hers that I'd read and how this tied in. And that caused her to be able to respond to me to say, hey, that's really good. That's great. When you have your event or your activity, if you are actually able to get some media to come, so they come with their nice cameras and they come with their microphones, make sure that you take a little bit of time to talk with them so that it's not just, 2 or 3 minutes of your event or your activity that they're filming or recording, but you're also getting a chance to share with them something about your message. And in that sharing, mention your legislators. If you mention your legislators, they're more likely to learn about that mention and to pay attention to what you're talking about. Get somebody who's part of your team to do photos or videos. Maybe somebody can even write an article after your event. Frequently, I've seen that can make a big difference. We submit the article, and that article is exactly what the paper publishes or exactly what they draw from to do their article. Make sure to talk about why this is an important issue, why it's important in the legislative process, or how it's important to your advocacy, and mention those legislator names. Finally, you want to follow up and thank those media folks. But then don't leave it there. Make sure that you send something about the coverage to your legislators or to your members of Congress. Send them a link to the interview, send them something about the coverage, send them the actual article, because the more times that they know that somebody's talking about them or saying that they should do something, it makes them sit up and pay attention. An example I'd like to share is a church that's north of the Twin Cities Metro in a small community where they were going to have a great big event to learn about climate change and to help the community and their legislators understand the crisis better. So they invited a meteorologist who's well known across the state. And that was a really good way to gain some credibility with local news outlets also. They knew some of the people in the local media because it's a small community. I think one of them might even go to their church, but they were able to build on those relationships. They had a great crowd. The media came and actually took some video, some TV footage of it, so that their legislators would know that people in that small town that is sometimes considered maybe more of a vacation area and less of a place that's focused on climate change or climate crisis, and got their legislators understanding that there are lots of people in that area that are thinking about that issue and what a difference that can make. I wish you well in your efforts. I wish you well in your advocacy, and I hope that you get some great media coverage.
Greetings. My name is Heather Taylor, and I'm the Director of Strategic Communications and Campaigns at Bread for the World. Now, to give a little context for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization, our mission is to mobilize congregations, Christian denominations across the country, to urge members of Congress to pass legislation to end hunger and poverty, both here in the United States and abroad. So that means that advocacy is our sweet spot. And we know that media is a powerful tool in the advocacy space. But during this segment, I'm going to do my best to hone in on social media. How and why is social media so powerful? Well, there are a couple of reasons. The first of which I may not have to tell you, but it is still worth stating. And that's the sheer exposure factor. It is a way that we can reach thousands, even millions, and increase awareness about a specific subject or cause that we care about. We know that social media posts have the potential to go viral. Not everything that we want to go viral, in fact, does, but the potential is always there. Secondly, it's a medium that we can use to reach our elected officials. We often have ready access through social media in ways that we don't in other mediums. It's important to call our elected officials, to write them, yes, but we can have ready access to their staffers, to them when we tag our elected officials and raise awareness about what it is we as constituents are hoping that they will do. Now, for social media to be effective, there are a few things that we need to keep in mind. The first is a common principle across various forms of media, and that is to know your audience. For example, at Bread for the World, along with congregations across the country and other nonprofits, we really want to reach more young people. We realize the potential. We realize that this is a critical audience, and we want to minister to them. We want to engage them in our advocacy work. So to do so, that means we have to ask ourselves, where are they? What spaces are they attracted to? Now, we also want to talk about different kinds of information that we filter through social media. So do we put all sorts of information on every platform all the time? Sometimes that's tempting because we're so eager just to get our message across. But we really want to think about the kinds of information based on the platform that we choose. For example, Facebook tends to be a little friendlier for data-heavy content or text-heavy. Other kinds of tools or information to consider are videos. Now, videos tend to be effective across every platform. We want to have effective videos, and that might be a session for another day, how to make an effective video. But we want to keep them short, 1 to 2 minutes. I'll give that tip in the present time. But videos work well, as do graphics across platforms, powerful graphics that are not text heavy, that do not have a lot of words, but just a couple of powerful key stats that can really drive home our message. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Twitter. Twitter in particular is an effective platform when we want to reach our elected officials. Again, we have the ability to tag our officials in an instant and potentially get a response. Bread for the World just conducted our advocacy summit in July. And in addition to encouraging our members and constituents to write Congress and to call Congress and to join in district meetings during the month of August, which is critical, we also mobilize them to tweet, to tag their officials about issues that we care about legislation that we would like to see passed. And in this way, in the span of 1 to 2 weeks, we have thousands of tweets going out. This is bound to get the attention of officials. We can engage in tweet storms with our coalitions, with our partner organizations. And it is effective, most effective, when we provide social media toolkits, which can be simple. I think it is also important to mention that it is a great space to thank our elected officials. We can't even begin to imagine the challenges that they are facing, and many are there for the right reasons. We can assume, based on a few sound bites that we catch on television or maybe read on online media platforms, but at the end of the day, thanking our members, our officials, when we see the needle move, when we see the good work, when we see that the legislation that we have been fighting for, sometimes for years, passes, taking the time to express our thanks. And lastly, I want to mention and uplift and highlight how social media can be used to document events and how this has such power when we're trying to build a movement. We may document vigils, protests, if there are officials who are abusing their power. If there's positive action that is happening, we can document with our smartphones, right? And they do not have to be professional filming, but just by taking the time to document, we can change the trajectory of a movement. These are some of the key ways and factors that social media can be used and how we must be strategic in our approach when we employ this tool. Thank you so much for letting me share a few tips with you. Do not hesitate to reach out. Again, I'm Heather Taylor at Bread for the World, and it is a blessing to stand alongside you in solidarity as people of faith committed to the cause of justice.
The actual decision to write something publicly, how did you see that in sort of the strategy of getting this bill unstuck?
Would that it actually gets the bill unstuck.
Yes.
That would be great. Well, we have a lot of people of faith in the state of New Jersey, of many faiths.
Yes.
And people of no faith, but a lot of people of many different faiths in New Jersey. So thinking that's the audience, is who's reading this this op-ed, or who might read this op-ed, and knowing that folks can then, from their own faith perspective, think, oh, this makes sense for us as well.
Yeah.
And perhaps then they might, whether they write an op-ed or then call some of the legislators, be sort of prompted to say, that I hadn't thought of the connections in quite this way.
And how did you decide? I mean, practically speaking, how did you craft it? How did you decide to shape this letter to the editor, this op-ed that you placed?
Right. Well, clearly I'm coming from a faith perspective, a Christian faith perspective at that. And so after reading the legislation, the wording of the actual bill, which is very simple, it's about studying.
Yes, it is.
To say, okay, this is really a very simple ask, and clearly there's nothing there that we would be opposed to as a church to support that call for study. So I thought a little bit of something from my personal life, connecting it to what we're doing in the church, and then stating and asking that the state do something similar. And what about the role of local pastors, deacons, congregation members, and their own witness, their own public witness?
Well, I think that's so helpful because in New Jersey here, we are those of you who don't know New Jersey might be surprised to hear this, we are a state of neighborhoods. You know, it's all about local stuff in New Jersey. And so when a local pastor there's an issue in their community, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's racial justice and policing, or you name the issue that bubbles up in the local community. I often encourage pastors to go ahead and write that op-ed or that letter to the editor, but to include and ask that other faith leaders in their community sign on to that letter as well, so that it's not just coming from the Lutheran pastor, but it's coming from the rabbi, it's coming from the imam, it's coming from the priest, that as many of the faith leaders in that community that could agree to craft this letter together and then get it placed in a local outlet, that has huge impact, because that is the kind of messaging then that kind of spreads to the whole municipality or the community at large, saying, look, the community of faith agrees. So many people perceive the community of faith don't agree on anything, and of course that's not true. There's lots we care a lot about together. So it amplifies and deepens the commitment and the call, and it's much easier for local pastors to do that because they have relationships with those local faith leaders. So it becomes a very much a grassroots, bubble up kind of piece of work that has huge impact. And often those state legislators who have this bill stalled in Trenton or whatever, they're all monitoring those local papers. Their staffs are monitoring all of that. So that information gets moved into their legislative aides and offices very quickly. And so I see that is the ways in which we can form those connections and relationships quite publicly, and it works its way through the process then in a way that's really impactful. So whether it's a national piece or a local, very local piece, I think that the use of op-eds and letters to the editors can have a great impact, provided that it's timely, it's connected to a timely issue, not sort of theoretically abstract, but right now in the here and now, and that it's shared by a wider community. Yes, the Lutherans, but also as many as that can join into that, and that and it can be placed in context of a news outlet that cares about the issue, that's going to shape it in a way that resonates with the reader, rather than sensationalizes or whatever. But I think that it's really important to work with reporters who have deep respect for the kind of work we're doing and appreciation for the efforts that the faith community is making to build a more just society. And
well, and we promise to do that, right? In the affirmation of baptism service, we promise to work for justice and peace in all the world, and to love all the people that Jesus loves. So part of that is using our voice that align with our theology, that aligns. We're not out there making an op-ed telling people who to vote for.
right now.
We're speaking about issues that affect all New Jerseyans, all folks across the country, if it's a national issue, to say this is who we are as the church.
Yeah.
And because we care about our neighbors, we want to raise these issues. My only hope is that we continue to do this, and that these op-eds get published, and that it actually makes a difference in the lives of the people who live here.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Thanks so
Yeah.
much, and thank you for your work.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Sarah.
My name is Nick Bates, and I'm a deacon in the ELCA and serve as director of the Hunger Network in Ohio, an ecumenical ELCA state public policy office. I was in college in 2004 when Facebook first hit the scene. And since that time, I've used Facebook and Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and other social media sites as part of our advocacy campaigns because they are effective tools for many of us to get our message out to a large group of people very quickly. The problem with social media and the internet in general is that it is very easy for people to intentionally create misinformation through images and articles. These misleading messages pollute the stream of ideas and make it even harder for accurate information to get out there. As the body of Christ, we need to promote good information online and in the physical world. So when you're online, how can you spot a post that is fake news or misinformation? Here are a few ideas to figure it out. Number one, when is it from? Misleading information will often not have a publish by date on it, or it will use outdated information in its sources so that the content can be generic enough and shared over and over again. Number two, who created the content? Look past your friend or family member who posted it or shared the content and look at the original publisher. TV stations, newspapers, well-known authors or researchers, organizations that you follow are likely to be more credible than a digital platform that was set up only a few days or a few months ago. If you can't figure out the original creator, it probably shouldn't be trusted. Number three, does the headline match the article? Is the headline accompanied by information that backs it up, or is it more of an inflammatory headline designed to evoke a strong emotional response? Number four, does it link to other reliable sources? Even if you have never heard of a specific organization or blogger, the information might still be valid. Look at the content. Does it link to other credible sources that are verifiable and trustworthy? So, a true story. I wrote a blog once about the need for $500 million of new investment to address a backlog in state park routine maintenance. About a year and a half after I wrote this blog, another organization quoted my blog in their writing. And then the governor quoted that information from them. How do I know this? Well, the Columbus Dispatch, our local newspaper, wanted to fact check that number of a $500 million backlog in routine maintenance. Well, luckily, I was able to go back to this article a year and a half later, click on the link, and find the data source for my information. Luckily, this happened. The governor was able to get his $500 million of new spending in our parks and made our Ohio's parks even greater than they were before. And number five, the final tip I recommend for folks is to Google it. See if you can find another organization or institution that confirms the data and information in the original Facebook or Twitter or social media post. When you come across an article or an image that contains misinformation, the number one thing to do, don't engage it. Because even negative comments about a post make Facebook and Twitter think it's an engaging post. So instead, take a screenshot of it. Block the content creator. Send a private message to your friend or family member letting them know that they shared false information. And finally, report it as fake or misleading to the platform like Facebook or Twitter. Because the reality is misleading information online builds on our emotions, stereotypes, and assumptions that we make every day. To get to the root of the problem of misinformation, we have to address the prejudices, the stereotypes that exist in our world that all the online content stems from. We have to be direct when somebody says something grounded in stereotypes in our congregations and in our families. Say things like, "I don't see it that way," and give your reasons why. Your personal story and experiences matter in this situation. If we aren't diligent with challenging misinformation in our personal lives, it's going to make its way into public policy. For example, in Ohio recently, during a committee hearing, a witness tried to stick a key to her face to prove misinformation was truth about vaccines. Unsurprisingly, it fell off, but the anti-vaccine misinformation continues to run rampant throughout our state house.
Greetings. My name is Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland-Toon, and I am the Chief Operating Officer for the National Council of the Churches of Christ in the USA. I want to thank Amy Ruman and Karen Kruger for letting me participate in your advocacy summer school, and also to give honor to Bishop Eaton, who is a great ally, ministry partner, and advocate in her own right. NCC, as you may know, has served as a leading voice of ecumenical witness to the living Christ since 1950. There are 38 member denominations, including ELCA, from Protestant, Anglican, Historic, African American, Orthodox, Evangelical, and Living Peace traditions. My background is in public relations and marketing and communications, and having accepted a call to ministry, I have lived out my call both in local Baptist churches and denominational and ecumenical organizations in preaching, teaching, congregational life, and in advocacy spaces. I consider myself both an advocate and an evangelist at heart, and I think it is really important for us to show up for the most vulnerable in our society and to advocate on their behalf, something I believe Jesus instructed us to do. I'm going to take a few minutes and just run quickly through a few ideas of how to get media attention for your advocacy efforts, and particularly your events. Press events, including rallies and marches, prayer vigils, speak outs, or other activities can really help amplify your message and bring attention to your advocacy issue. When organizing events, ask yourself, what message are we trying to get across? Do we have interesting speakers? Who would be the best spokespeople for our message? Are we able to do something demonstrative that will be visually appealing or particularly newsworthy? Can we choose a location that will bring attention to our advocacy efforts? Are we saying something interesting or out of the ordinary? Is direct action or civil disobedience appropriate? Be strategic and careful in your planning. Do not organize an event that will somehow conflict with your message or invite speakers who will do that either. For example, if your event is about environmental stewardship, you probably don't want to hand out a lot of programs, paper programs, or plastic bottles or styrofoam cups. You also should carefully consider whether or not to invite elected officials or another celebrity type person, recognizing that having them at an event can improve your chances of getting media coverage. It can also get in the way of your message if it's not the right person who can help you get your message across. One example I'd like to share is the Act Now to End Racism rally that NCC held on the National Mall in 2018. ACT stands for Awaken, Confront, and Transform. The event was planned to coincide with the 50th year since the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We were able to get about 10 to 15,000 people to be a part of a day-long activity on the mall. It was a national mobilization effort when people came to DC on a Wednesday with the support of NCC member denominations like the ELCA, of course. In this instance, it was the location, the significance of the date, the planned silent march, which was particularly meaningful for people wanting to gather at the MLK Memorial, and then the rally that drew so much attention. The key is planning. Know who you want to reach, be clear about your messaging, be creative and organize interesting events that will be unique and thoughtful, be authentic in what you're trying to do so that you don't come off as just playing to the cameras but instead centering the issue and the people most impacted by it. Partnering with other like-minded congregations or community allies is also very effective. Recognize that even if you don't get the coverage you hope for, there are other opportunities to use the footage and the messaging to get the word out later through social media, e-newsletters, and your own communications channels. This is especially helpful because the media does not always focus their coverage on your main points or advocacy message. Finally, make sure you undergird your advocacy with lots of prayer and discernment about how to be effective, impactful, and prophetic. It is important for people of faith in particular that the goal is to have a public witness, not a public spectacle, being ever mindful that we are by our actions not only calling attention to ourselves and the issue that we're advocating for, but we're also calling attention to our faith. Thank you so much. God bless you and all the best as you endeavor to be a witness in the public square and to advocate for God's people. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's ELCA Advocacy Starter Kit session, reflecting on the question, how do I use media for impact? For more information and more opportunities for advocacy, visit elca.org/advocacy/signup or use the QR code on your screen. Thank you for joining us for the ELCA Advocacy Starter Kit sessions, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the work of advocacy.